Probably. All right. All right. Let's see. Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the Board Secretary on November 2nd, 2022 in the following manner. Posted notice on the school bulletin board of the administration building, transmitted to the Courier Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, and the clerk of Cherry Hill Township. Please do join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Mrs. Sugars, would you please call roll?
Mrs. Arroyo.
Here.
Mrs. Stratton.
Here.
Mrs. Fleischer.
Here.
Mr. Mayor.
Here.
Dr. Rude.
Here.
Ms. Stern.
Here.
Mrs. Tong.
Here.
Mrs. Winters.
Here.
Mr. Avadia.
Here. Okay. That will bring us to our presentation for the evening, and I'll turn it to Dr. Malash to introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. I'm very excited that Mrs. Faith Holmgren is with us this evening. Mrs. Holmgren will be delivering the spring 2022 NJSLA ELA Math and Science results. Mrs. Holmgren is our district testing coordinator. She's been in our district testing office for a number of years. Any type of standardized test that goes on in the district, Mrs. Holmgren is involved with. She does an incredible amount of training with our teachers. She also serves as a tremendous resource in breaking down the results and discussing how taking the information from the results can impact instruction. She serves a very vital role in the Cherry Hill School District. So without further ado, Mrs. Holmgren, I will turn it over to you.
Good evening. Let me make sure. Can everyone hear me? Perfect. My name is Faith Holmgren, and as Dr. Malash said, I am the district testing coordinator. This evening, I will be presenting the spring 2022 NJSLA ELA Math and Science results using the template provided to all districts by the NJDOE. One too far there, Mr. Poldinsky. Okay. As you're aware, participation in the NJSLA ELA Math Science is required by state and federal law for all students in grades 3 through 8 and high school. These assessments measure student proficiency with grade level skills, knowledge, and concepts that are critical to college and career readiness. The NJSLA also helps us to identify areas of curricular strength, as well as areas in which there are opportunities for growth and improvement. So you are aware, we will not be comparing the results from spring 2022 to results of prior year NJSLA administrations. Spring 2022 results will be used as a baseline for comparison of future standardized results per direction from the NJDOE. Please also note, this presentation does not include fall 2022 Start Strong results. The fall 2022 Start Strong results will be presented, however, in early 2023. Start Strong is a formative assessment created to be used in conjunction with our local assessments. The NJDOE strongly discourages districts from comparing Start Strong data to any NJSLA data due to the different design and purpose of Start Strong compared to the NJSLA. The data you are going to receive today is an overall summary. Please know, we as a district take a more intensive approach when working with this data at both the school and district level. We identify areas of strength and improvement, as I mentioned already, by standard, as well as for specific student support. So let's get started. Before I dive right into the data, I wanted to provide you with performance levels for ELA and mathematics. Levels 4 and 5 on this chart indicate that a student is proficient and on track to be college and career ready. Below the performance levels, you will find the scale scores that correlate to each of these levels. This first slide provides you with the NJSLA ELA data for grades 3 through 9 in percentages by performance levels. It also shows a comparison of performance for the district and the state by grade level. You can see here that our district proficiency, which is highlighted in green, is above the state average in all grades 3 through 9 for English language arts. Here you can find the mathematics data for grades 3 through 8, which can be read in the same manner as the previous slide. Our students in grades 3 through 7 also performed above the state average in mathematics. The grade 8 mathematics data represented here only includes the data for those students who took the grade 8 mathematics assessment. It does not include those middle school students who took either Algebra 1 or geometry. This slide includes the data for Algebra 1, geometry, and Algebra 2. I would like to point out that the district average for Algebra 1 and geometry does include students who took Algebra 1 or geometry at the middle school level. Moving into the science results. Different from ELA and math, which are based on 5 performance levels, science is based on 4 performance levels. Levels 3 and 4 indicate that a student is on track to be college and career ready. For NJSLA science, our students who took the assessment at all 3 levels, grades 5, grade 8, and 11, performed above the state average. To help you more easily navigate the data presented on the next several slides, please note the following. Across the top, you will find the performance levels broken down by grade. Blue represents grade 3, peach represents grade 4, and green represents grade 5. Bless you, Dr. Malash. Let's take a look at the first school listed here, Barton. You will notice that 20% of the students at Barton in grade 3 performed within level 1. 9% of the students in grade 4 performed within level 1, and 5% of students in grade 5 performed within level 1. The elementary schools were separated alphabetically, so you will find the first half of the elementary schools on this slide, and the second half on the next slide. You will also notice at the very bottom 2 rows, I provide you with both the district and the state percentages as well. The one thing that I want to draw your attention to before we continue any further is the large percentage of our students who fell within level 3. So what does this mean? It means a substantial amount of our students are approaching proficiency. Conversations have begun at all 3 levels regarding how we can move these students from level 3 to being proficient. And as I mentioned, here you can find the data for the second half of the elementary schools. Moving on to the middle school ELA data, broken down by school, again, providing the data for the district and state in the bottom 2 rows. You will notice a similar trend at the middle school level, with the percentage of students who are approaching proficiency within level 3. This slide provides you with the grade 9 ELA data. It also concludes our ELA data by school. Now we will move on to the same exhibits for mathematics. On the next two slides, you will find the elementary mathematics results for grades 3 through 5, separated alphabetically. Similar to our ELA results, we found that large percentages of students performed within level 3 in mathematics as well. And the second half of our elementary schools. This slide provides you with the data for our students who took the grade 6, grade 7, or grade 8 mathematics assessment. This data does not include those middle school students who took the Algebra 1 or geometry assessment. To provide you with some background information, Eureka Grade 8 was implemented for the first time for grade 8 students at Rosa and Beck in fall of 2021. So all grade 8 students at Rosa and Beck who were enrolled in grade 8 math and took the spring 2022 NJSLA grade 8 mathematics assessment had Eureka mathematics instruction for the first time during the 2021-2022 school year. Also, Carusi first piloted Eureka during the 1920 school year, of which the year was, as we all know, interrupted in March due to the pandemic. This means grade 8 students at Carusi who took the spring 2022 NJSLA grade 8 mathematics assessment had Eureka instruction since the 6th grade. But keep in mind, their 6th grade year was interrupted by the pandemic, and a major portion of their 7th grade year included hybrid and remote instruction. We have broken the Algebra 1 results up by level. On this slide, you will find the Algebra 1 results for those students who took this course at the middle school level. And here you will find the Algebra 1 results for our high school students. Similarly to the Algebra 1 results, we broke the data down by level. So here you will find the geometry results for our middle school students, followed by the geometry results for our high school students. For Algebra 2, you will only find results for the high school level because we did not have any middle school students who took this assessment. Moving into the science results for grade 5 students, broken down as we have done for both ELA and math. Alphabetically in 2 slides, here is the first half of the elementary schools, followed by the second half of the elementary schools. Moving on to grade 8 science results. I want to point out yet again, look at the percentage of students who fall within level 2, nearing proficiency. And finally, grade 11 science. This is the last slide of the percentage results portion of the presentation. We will now move into providing you with the data for our subgroups. You will find a key at the bottom of this slide, which indicates the results by group. The groups include all students, English learners, economically disadvantaged students, and students with disabilities. Here you can find the data for grades 3 through 5 ELA by subgroup. Please be aware, students can be represented in multiple subgroups. This slide provides you with the data by subgroup for grades 6 through 9 ELA. The one thing that I want to bring to your attention on this slide, you will notice that there is no data presented for English learners for any of the grades. If there are less than 10 students in a subgroup, the data is not reported. So that is why you will find 0% in the column where we would report the data for our ELL students who either met or exceeded the standard. However, in this case, there were less than 10 students, so there was no data to report. And now moving into mathematics, grades 3 through 5. Moving on to our next slide, you will find here again that grade 8 economically disadvantaged students are not represented, and the subgroup of English language learners within the geometry assessment is not included either because there is no subgroup data to report. Please note the data for Algebra 1 and geometry includes those students who took either of these courses at the middle school level. And finally, our science results by subgroup. After compiling and reviewing this data, there are several notable achievements that I would like to highlight. For English language arts, our district average for students who are proficient is above the state average in all grades 3 through 9. For mathematics, the district average for students who are proficient is again above the state average in every grade, with the exception of grade 8 and geometry. And for science, similarly to ELA, the district average for students who are proficient is above the state average in every tested grade. I also pointed out on several slides the high percentage of our students who were approaching expectations. We found this was true for all 3 tested areas, ELA, math, and science. And as I said, we are creating plans across all 3 levels to address the students who fall into this approaching category. Here you will find examples of ways in which we are responding to this data. While we recognize that our achievement is not at the levels in which Cherry Hill Public Schools is accustomed to, our data is aligned with the national data that was just released based on NAEP. We also look forward to seeing data broken down by comparable districts, which is unavailable at this time, but will eventually give us the opportunity to collaborate amongst the successes and challenges we all are facing. We see this as an opportunity to demonstrate the strong instructional capacity of our teachers to increase achievement over the coming years. Pre-COVID, we began the conversation around mathematics scores across the district, as you know. The pandemic has furthered this discrepancy in mathematics, and this will continue to be a focus and priority. As I mentioned in the very first slide, the data you are receiving today is an overall summary. Please know, we as a district take a more intensive approach when working with this data at both the school and district level. And as I mentioned earlier, we are looking to identify areas of strength and improvement by standard and for specific student support. Thank you for having me this evening. Are there any questions?
All right, who would like to start? All right. Yep, Mrs. Elmore Stratton.
Just what is PLC groups? What are they? Is that learning communities?
They are professional learning communities. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Mrs. Winters?
Thank you. So I was looking at our district goals and I noticed that when we're talking about NJSLA data, we're talking about using it to analyze the effectiveness of curricular changes on academic outcomes, including Eureka Math. And we're also talking about it in terms of measuring growth demonstrated. So I understand that the problems with the math data are indicative of a larger national trend. And I understand what you said about the implementation of Eureka during the COVID pandemic. When I look at the 8th grade data, and I was able to split it out. Thank you for the raw numbers, by the way. It looks like there's about 35% of kids who take the regular 8th grade math course and then move up to take Algebra 1 in 9th grade. That cohort, and that's a huge chunk of our kids, seems to be really struggling. So with all of these things, how do you see us effectively using this data to analyze both the effectiveness of Eureka as a new curriculum and the learning loss we're seeing due to the pandemic?
Yeah, good question. So I'll jump in on that one. I think so. So these numbers here represent pretty much nothing more than numbers. Behind these numbers are children, and those children are known by the school administrators, by teachers, by principals, and they are developing plans and targeted plans toward the individual children that these numbers represent. I think the other piece of it is that these numbers do not represent any type of growth metrics that may exist for the children as well. So this is a raw achievement level. So level 3 is a level 3 on this paper, but within the level 3, there's a range of scoring that a child may achieve. And I think, you know, we talk about PLC meetings, but the PLC meetings that take place and the data discussions are focused on the levels of growth that the children are making. So it's targeting individual kids based upon their individualized needs that may exist. I can tell you, for instance, at the high schools, they repurpose the use of their mathematics seminar classes so that now, instead of children just being assigned based upon a previous year's score, children are assigned based upon where they're performing within a specific mathematics unit. So they may come in for additional support in an area that they're demonstrating difficulty, and in another area they're not demonstrating difficulty, they may not be assigned in that particular course.
So I'm understanding that you see this data as a way to address individual student performance, but I think my question was more, you know, as an overview, how do we look at it for effectiveness of the implemented curriculum and how our students are achieving and growing over time?
Yeah, so typically I think when we analyze the effectiveness of a curriculum, I mean, you know, usually that's in a 3 to 5 year range. We want to see, you know, we want to be able to do some type of trend analysis by having multiple years of data. You mentioned the impact that the pandemic had. I'm holding an article, I'm holding a magazine here at week, and the nation's report card shows historic drop in math and reading, and specifically children that were affected the greatest, as we discussed at the CNI meeting, children that need that additional support from teachers, those that don't necessarily have the independence to be able to just know what to do and to be able to follow through. It's fascinating. In my own home, one of my sons, the 2 sons in high school, but one of my sons is independent. He has absolutely zero problems, high achiever. He did phenomenal during the pandemic. I have another child who needs that teacher support. He needs to be there. He needs to be eyeball to eyeball like we are right now as he discusses things that he may be confused about. The pandemic was catastrophic for him. He struggled immensely, and we had to load supports on him, my wife and I, in order for him to be successful. And that's the dynamic that we saw with our kids in school. It's summarized here. The children who struggle the most are those that lack that independence and ability, you know, to self-regulate and work on their own. So it's an interesting dynamic. As Ms. Holmgren mentioned, you know, the state is looking at it as an opportunity for this to be like a baseline year for us for moving forward. And that's why these comparisons to previous years don't exist as well.
Ms. Winters, in the past, we have done a part 2. So I have, or my former counterpart, Val Sadwin, has presented the data. And then I have done a follow-up on exactly what does this look like when I go into the schools and work with the teachers, work with the administrators. So if that is something that you would be interested in, I would be happy to have a follow-up in which I'm able to, share with you what my meetings look like and what the topics and areas of conversation are. I can let you know that not only are we talking about individual student data, and not only are we looking at individual students, but we are looking at the standards in which we did not perform well, where these standards fall within our curriculum map. So curriculum maps were adjusted based upon Eureka instruction. So I think I mentioned last week when we spoke, I had a meeting at one of the middle schools the following day. We started those conversations around students last year really struggled within these three specific standards. Where do these standards fall within our curriculum map for grade 8 mathematics? What does instruction now look like? What supports are we providing to our teachers so that they have capacity to teach these standards? So these are all the types of conversations that are happening based upon all of the numbers that you saw tonight. And I would be more than happy, as I said, to do a follow-up.
Okay, thanks. Let's keep going around. I think there's a next step. Let's see if we can craft it through board member comments. Ms. Stern?
Yes, I think that was really loud. So I had sent a question in having reviewed this ahead of time about, what are some of the interventions that we're putting into place. I think obviously teacher training is very important and how they implement it. I think that sometimes, I'm not sure how long that takes to kind of actually make a difference. We looked at the Start Strong data, which I understand is not to be compared, right? But it was, extremely concerning when we looked at it, and that was 10 months ago, I think it was. But actually these mathematic challenges existed pre-COVID.
Yeah.
You can look back to a board meeting 5-6 years ago and these exact same types of conversations were going on, the exact same concerns from board members. And even some of the similar responses. We're talking to principals, we're talking to teachers, we're putting a plan together, and you have some interventions, which I think are really important. I think, my main question, which I put, as well earlier, is in our written, correspondence is, what are the best practices that have been identified? Because there has been a lot of research done. As a matter of fact, I think that once COVID hit, everything that was researched before that wasn't COVID related stopped being researched. And all research and all grant money much of it has focused on, impact of COVID and across every discipline and area of work. And there is research, is my understanding. And I guess I'm wondering, how do we intervene at this moment? Especially because things like algebra, which is not my specialty area. It's not my strength, but what I've learned through my own kids is how fundamentally important of a building block algebra is for all math, for science. And we're seeing kids, the impact of, and that we'll just pull out algebra. Obviously ELA is also significant. We're seeing how this is playing out. And I certainly appreciate, conversations and we're making plans. And I think that's important. That's a step. But I think we really need to understand, some of the things that are known best practices and how Cherry Hill is implementing those.
I can speak. There is a new instructional tool that is being used throughout the district. And it is a mathematics instructional tool, and it is called Equip. And it is aligned to each of the instructional units within Eureka. So for example, if I am a student who is, we've completed 2 units of Eureka, it is a pre-test given at the beginning of every unit, and it identifies the prerequisite skills that students are lacking before moving into that next unit. So teachers are actually able to target these specific skills that a student might not have mastered in the previous year. And they're able to provide instructional strategies to them, and they're actually able to provide, I work in all the schools. So I'm giving you one specific example of a school that I know is using this. And I think as a former teacher, knowing what skills I need to focus on before moving into the next unit is going to help me to understand the strengths and needs of my students better. And I'm going to be able to respond to this data as I move into the next unit of instruction. That's one example. I don't know.
Yeah, and I can say, I think, some of the traditional things that are, provided are things such as opportunities for after-school tutoring, opportunities during the school day via lunch and learn. These have been challenging to provide in some instances due to the levels of stress that people have endured and have felt. To be quite honest, I mean, prior to the pandemic, staffing or having teachers available to be able to attend to after-school tutoring sessions and homework clubs was a lot easier to staff that than after the pandemic. I think, just the amounts of stress that staff members were dealing with affected that in some regards. I think something else that we've been exploring has been how to engage children in investigations, mathematical investigations. We've been just exploring pedagogically how the minds of our children have shifted in the modern day era. So the traditional way that I learned mathematics and rose and through rote practice and things and drill and practice does not necessarily work as well for our children in some respects. So we're exploring opportunities to redesign what mathematics classrooms look like now and how the discourse takes place. We've invested in to study of the visible learning, for instance, by the lead researcher on what works in education, a gentleman by the name of John Hattie, who conducted a meta-analysis of meta-analyses of learning. And we've unpacked strategies that actually, that his research and his effect size study has revealed that actually work. And we are implementing those strategies without going into a bunch of education-ese here. We're looking to train up teachers on how to impact or how to introduce some of these high yield impact strategies as well. It's a shift though. It's a shift in pedagogy to a degree, while keeping some, the old and merging it with some of these new concepts as well.
Thanks. So, all right. So thank you let me first say, this is a lot of work and I believe it. This is good work. Here's where I think we need to go. There's just a couple pieces. This isn't where we expect Cherry Hill to be. I think, you said it yourself, right? We don't expect this. This is where we are. This is fine. I don't want to necessarily belabor where we are. For me, what's most interesting is not what's in meeting with our professionals who are much better suited to be in those meetings than we are, or to analyze what's important. The thing is, we want the numbers to go up. At the same time, yeah, I hear what Dr. Morton's saying. Scoring well on tests is not the only thing that's important to us as a district. But I think the step two that you mentioned, I think for me, it's got to be the point of view of what's going to make the most difference that this board can support and understand and track pretty closely in time. Because Ms. Stern is correct. We do look at this, very often, and we have, lovely conversations about how we'd like it to get better. But I think we'd like it to get better. Now, in our structure, that has to happen by committee. And I don't think it makes sense to start with the work and present something again at committee. I think it makes sense for committee to come back and say, look, here are the 5 things that we could see that could make a difference. Otherwise, look, I believe good work's going on in every building every day. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But I guess part of for me is I'd like to know, is some of this unreasonable? There's one of these things where 0% of people in our district are proficient at 8th grade mathematics. Now, in the state, 0.8% are, maybe the post is too high. I don't know. But I think, you all are much more equipped to kind of analyze this, but it's analysis and action for next steps that I would be most interested in seeing. I totally believe this, and this represents, I think, a lot of work, and it's well presented, but on its own, it's not, I don't think it's going to help us do our job. Do people have a point of view? Can we kind of leverage this work through Rosie to make some progress on this in the next 4 weeks? Something like that, 3 weeks. Committee meetings sneak up on you in November. But does that sound like something we can all kind of take a hard look at and think about what matters? So, yes.
I
Ms.
just, yes, I think that's where it has to go. And I do think having a clear sense of, reasonable expected, progress, how we measure that and what it, what that looks like, because that's not right. That's your guys' expertise, not ours. Right. So you guys, the district professionals being able to ascertain what that is and helping set that up and having those conversations or CNI. I don't want to lose sight also though of our subgroups, because this is also, we're talking about in some of these groups in terms of expectations and meeting them. I mean, some of them are, 25% of where the other students are. That's pretty scary for these kids and what this means for, where they're going and their ability to be successful beyond school. And how that builds on itself. So that would be another, ask of CNI to ensure to kind of have that be part of the conversation. So
I think the good thing, what we talked about the other day is about this, is that the assessment of each student, you can actually go in and break it down further into exactly the spaces and areas that they had difficulty with. And then that's what the teachers are going to be reviewing, and that's what the team's going to be reviewing to then start focusing on those standards that we have to focus on in the curriculum. And if that means the curriculum team in the future has to reevaluate, okay, this is where we were before when we implemented Eureka in 8th grade. Now we have to adjust perhaps, but we won't know that yet until that full assessment is done. Like this is just the raw data that's being shared with us, and now they're going to have to break it down. And so we talked about that. And if you have any other suggestions, they email me and we'll prep for the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, Mrs. Elmore Stratton.
I just had a question, and I'm probably going to take a lot of hits for this question, but when we look at this and it's all comparison amongst our own schools, do we ever use this data to say, such and such at such and such school is doing so well, so let's move them over to a school that's having a bit more difficulty? And I know I'm going to take a hit for that because that means you have to leave your building, but do we ever think of that? Because as a parent, yeah, we've seen this data before. And as a parent, I've always just in my head, this is just me, have always been like, well, shake it up and move some of the people from one side to the other side, or move some of the best practices people to the other side. So do we ever do that with this data, or do we just like leave it as we just need to work on that teacher or those set of students?
Yeah, so we're able to disaggregate the data by teacher, not necessarily for the purpose of moving one person to a different side of town, but we do disaggregate, and we try to identify effective practices that may be taking place. And part of the PLC framework allows for discussions to happen so that individuals can share, positive practices in their classrooms.
I mean, that's just for us to know, like, we can't stay in one place and make just the one set of kids really, really doing well, and then the other set are not. And then we bring it to you guys and say, fix it. So I think as a board, our role in this, one of our roles in this, is to be cognizant and aware of when we have to shake up. And I'm thinking about my committee, when we have to shake things up, there's reasonings behind it. And so, you can't always just keep things the same and stay in your little pocket and then expect great change. So that's just going to always be my thing. I know everybody will disagree, but that's going to always be my thing. We all work for one district and not a specific school. So maybe some people from different schools need to go to other schools to help out. My mother's probably going to kill me for saying all of this because she's a former teacher, but it's just something I feel strongly about. And then my other part too of that is, as a board, what always with these presentations, I'm like, this is great. Now, what else besides holding them accountable and holding their feet to the fire for fix this and make it better? What is our role in this in terms of what we should be doing next? Or what are we to do with this data at this point?
Yeah, no, okay, let's start with this. So Mrs. Elmore Stratton, I meant to say Mrs. Arroyo before. Okay. I think that, look, this is, I mean, honestly, this is where as a board, we've got to think about it. We got to be thoughtful. I don't want to necessarily spitball. Yeah, there are 25 things that maybe could work that we could come up with in the next 45 minutes. I don't think that's the way to do it. Let's be, be thoughtful and deliberative. I mean, I think the answer is there's something we want to see different. There's a lot of possible things. In terms of the board, we're talking about policy, we're talking about personnel, we're talking about money, but let's see, given what we're asking for today, which is, I think, quite different than what we were asking for just a few days ago in committee. So let's evolve with this, but I don't know how much, more necessarily speculation we want to do, like just at the table off the cuff. Okay. Just because, look, we greatly value our teachers and what they're doing and the buildings they're at now. And, in this environment, we don't want to, there's no, we're not going to like introduce like many levels of uncertainty by speculation, but let's be contemplative. Mrs. Arroyo is going to take us to the next step of this journey. But I mean, I think if I'm understanding the group and my own comments, we're going to need a next step because this won't get us to a next step. This is what we want to listen to. And then I think we can move to the next step. Does that sound fair? All right. All right. Thank you very much. And we will see you again very soon, it looks like.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. That brings us to correspondence. And I know there is correspondence out there. Who would like to start? Mrs. Arroyo.
Well, I'd like to start because I also didn't attend the conference, so I'm sure you guys are going to be talking about that. But I want to, let me just pull it up real quick. Highlight 2 students from Cherry Hill that were named Superwomen of the Year. And it's Isabel, and forgive me if I mispronounce the names, Isabel Berger and Anjali Soni. And so I'm just going to read this real quick. Cherry Hill students Isabel Berger and Anjali Soni have made it their mission to help others with special interest in healthcare field. The 2 started their nonprofit organization, Comfort Kits, for chemo care once COVID isolated the young patients at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. From their usual stream of supportive visitors, the 2 raised money for kits by selling homemade dog treats, which funded 50 care packages to show love and support to children undergoing chemotherapy. Motivated by their donations, Sony started working at Nothing Bundt Cake, contributing 100% of her earnings to CKCC, while Berger expanded dog treats for chemo care. A year later, the pair returned to CHOP to donate 168 more kits. Now they're sophomores and are still hard at work raising funds while distributing customized comfort kits. They both devote 100% of their income to CKCC with the support of local businesses and their community. The 2 teens hope to continue growing and expanding their donations to bring comfort to the area's youngest chemotherapy patients. I thought that was absolutely amazing. So congratulations, and the honors well earned. And I hopefully, if I haven't met you yet, I get to meet you guys soon because that's awesome.
Very nice. All right. Who would like to go next? Or something. Okay, Mrs. Winters.
So I attended the Cherry Hill East Fall preview concert with Mr. Avadia, and I loved it because I am a former high school color guard member and clarinet player and singer. So it was right up my alley. I couldn't believe the phenomenal talent at East, and just getting to see one song from each ensemble was really neat. It gave me a taste of what goes on over there. I was really proud of all the students and everything they've achieved so far. I mean, it's only really been a few weeks since school started in September. And then I guess I'll talk about, we all attended the board workshop together. It was really nice to go to all the different sessions. I attended both a session on preschool expansion, which is my favorite thing on earth, and also on school start times, and spent a lot of time with all the board members, and I appreciate it all, getting to know all of you. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll go next. I also went to that fall preview concert. For me, the highlight, I think, well, the highlight was when my daughter was performing whatever she did, but the actual highlight was when they, yeah. But talk about time, but when they did the thing from Stranger Things, man, that was well done. So anyway, good time. Be there next time. It's good. Now my daughter is extremely talented, I think. Yeah, at workshop, workshop's always nice. NJSBA does a nice job. Couple just brief things. Learned a little bit about Z Space, which is a VR AR medium space. The guy there, I think, was trying to sell a device, but basically what you can do is you can sort of explore kind of in this area of a laptop stuff. And it's cool because you can do, and the acronym they used was DICE. You can do things that are dangerous, impossible, counterproductive, or expensive to do any other way. It's not counterproductive. It is productive by doing it this way. So for instance, you could dissect a frog. You could do an autopsy. You could do all sorts of, like, you could explore the moon, like just things you're not going to do. And so it was kind of interesting. It sounds like they have like 1 million devices out there in the country. So it's, it's just something to explore that was interesting. Next thing was demystifying school rankings and ratings was interesting. I think it was Hamilton. No, maybe it wasn't. No, it was some district that they had basically dissected where the rankings and ratings of schools comes from. They definitely had some favorites, but essentially the exercise was, once they figured out all the different metrics and how they were rated, they could have interesting discussions about like community values. And one example they said is, do you care about how many students are taking AP classes or how many students are getting, like a passing grade on the AP? So depending on what you value, and, it will make a big difference in rankings, but that may not matter overall. But just their whole thing was to understand how these things are derived and to start to study those. They do a state of the schools once a year that is very numeric. And so just interesting, idea of what they had done. This was I don't know who the two people were. One of them for sure was the superintendent, but it was just an interesting journey they had undertaken, and they'd gotten a lot of data from it. One of the most interesting things was a session called School Buildings and Grounds as Sustainability Learning Labs. And they talked about getting certifications for sustainability. They talked about learning environments, so stuff like learning how a digester works, or solar panels, or gardening, all these different things as learning spaces. Interesting timing for us, given the bond, just thinking about in the future, learning that can take place right at our building level. They talked about savings. They talked about some grants that exist. These guys have, it seems like maybe $10,000 at a time to give, but they're certainly interested in working with us, the people who put this workshop together, and we've been connected to them for years. So definitely something to think about. They also talked a lot about having less waste. So as we think about our goals, that was certainly a very interesting thing. And yeah, workshop was very nice. Who's next? Is Elmore starting?
So I stuck to jazz it up. That's what I was like. So I really stuck to tracks that were pertaining to my committee. So a lot of HR related, and some of the big topics that we're looking to tackle. So I did go to school start times and, listen to a couple of districts that have implemented earlier start times and what are some of their challenges. And that was really interesting to hear. None that are as large as us that we're sharing. So that was a little bit, we have to have a certain perspective hearing from some of those districts that are a lot smaller than we are. I also went to a few things that were dedicated to diversity and equity, and I was really excited. I brought back one quote to my committee about, I'm very much a firm believer of having your staffing reflect the populations you're serving. But I heard at the conference, someone say it should also be reflective of the students you're projected to serve or your projected community. And so I feel like that's really important with us because our community is changing. And so we should also allow our schools and school administration and staffing to be reflective of those changes as well. One other thing I really found interesting, I went to the school superintendents, I think, were giving a specific track of things. And, I really enjoyed hearing from several districts in terms of where they are with equity and ensuring that they keep the fight and not, they had a very good discussion on fighting fatigue. And then one of the things, another point that I took away from that is, out of 600 districts, there's only 33 that have an African-American or identify as Black superintendent. And so for me, I really immediately thought of the fact that we're a district that has 3 superintendents that are African-American assistant or not. And I feel like that's something that it's showing that we're ready to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And so that was just a really proud moment for me to be able to say that, or be able to have that back for my district. So a lot of other things I shared with my committee of stuff that I learned, but it was really the recurring theme. And I said this to Ms. Stern while we were there. The recurring theme seems to be that for as much as we are as hard on ourselves, we are a bit ahead of some of these surrounding districts in some of the big things we want to do. We've taken strides that other districts have yet to even venture on. So I just wanted that to be pointed out, because I think we get really hard on ourselves of we should be doing this, this, and this. But in comparison, which we don't want to compare, but in comparison, we're up here. We are a best practice district. And some of the things we're doing are best practices. So outside of that, also had my Camden Educational Commission Services meeting, and nothing really big there to report, just a general meeting in and out. So.
Mr. Mayor?
So I think I can follow up pretty naturally to what Ms. Elmore Stratton reported. I too found myself mostly on a track which was diversity, equity, inclusion heavy, because that's something that obviously I'm very focused on and passionate about. One in particular was positive supports to address disproportionality in discipline, which is an issue that we identified as a challenge that I think we need to address in the Hanover study that came out earlier. We learned a great deal about and I obviously can keep this pretty high level, some of the important things that we could do structurally to try and identify some of the drivers of that disparity and start working towards improvement. And we're there to some degree in a lot of these. School leadership has to be involved, and of course we are. The importance of a positive school culture, climate and culture. We really do need to continue to work on that. And the importance of parent and community engagement with regards to these issues. These are also things that are touch upon our district goals, so they line up really well. Similarly, one of the sessions I attended was on inherent bias and marginalization on prejudice, and the importance of trying to be better at understanding where some of our biases really are not intentional. They are inherent. They tend to be a primary driver sometimes, and we can do better in trying to understand where those come from. Along the same points as Ms. Elmore Stratton mentioned, I also attended a number of sessions on student wellness and found that for the most part, we are well ahead of what some of the other districts are doing, probably what most of the other districts are doing. Doesn't mean that there isn't room to grow and we can't learn from some of those. But I felt like we may have an opportunity next year to present, and we really are in many areas a best practice district. So on the whole, I thought the conference, the workshop was great, a lot of good information. Felt good about where we are in some areas, but we'll never feel good enough to think we've landed the ship or the plane. We always have a lot of work to do, but it was a great few days of learning.
Mr.
Okay, so I'm gonna shift gears and jump back a little bit. Boy, my mic is really, sorry, guys. A little loud. Earlier in October, I attended the first meeting for the school year of the Mental Health Task Force. It was a great meeting. Lots of people attended, well attended, mostly by district staff who are involved in, with the, guidance counselors and ABS, anti-bullying specialists and other folks, and then also some community members and also community resources. So it was really a nice blend. There was quite a few topics that were discussed. One of them was just a couple brief updates related to the fact that the S-12 procedure was going to be talked about in the P&L meeting. And so that was mentioned, and that we'll be hearing more about that further. But what came out of that discussion was a person who's involved with a county level outside entity, talking about that entity actually is working on trying to address the issues of the needs with mental health and suicide prevention and also homicide prevention, is at the state level, at the county level, and they actually want to use our procedure as a model for how that can be perhaps become a standardization across the county, which is pretty cool, and a little bit of pressure on us. So, but that was neat to hear that, we're being looked at as kind of a best practice as well, as to your point. So I know that there's more to come on that tonight. And a few other things that were addressed in that meeting, just discussion about the district implementation of the question, persuade, and refer training that goes on for all staff, including ed assistants. The idea of even implementing that with anyone who interacts with kids in our district, that idea of possibly, ensuring that everyone understands how to intervene. If a student says something that's possibly of concern, that every person who works with kids knows how to kind of either intervene or bring that kid to someone who can, follow that. So great discussion. Also discussion about upcoming parent education seminars are going to be offered for, that are continuation of what goes on, kind of parent university type education, specifically on mental health related topics. And also in February, there's going to be an in-service for the staff, and specifically for the staff in the district who are interacting with kids in a mental health basis. I guess mostly the guidance counselors, case managers, are going to be provided with a specific intervention training using SAND therapy. And part of that is just turns out, it's in strategies, that intervention that is being used by some of the staff in our schools who are interacting with kids on a mental health to provide support. And it's also meant to support the staff to do something and learn for some who don't know it, learn a new skill, just kind of peak their professional development as kind of a mental health support. which I think that's part of our goals too. So it was nice to hear. And that's all from that. And then yes, workshop, the New Jersey School Board Association workshop, which was large and lots of vendors and people and workshops to go to. I went to a bunch. I'll just touch on a few. One on STEAM and using ESSER funds to have STEAM programs. There was someone from Rutgers who presented on that and talked about ways that different districts had provided, those types of learning experiences for students using those funds. I went to a part of when we talk about achievement is understanding, for me, it's just not my wheelhouse. So I wanted to learn a little more about, how those decisions are made, how best practices are figured out from a kind of scientific perspective. So went to a workshop on that. And it was interesting because there was like a formula, effective instructional practices, effective implementation times enable context equals socially significant outcomes. Okay, so I was like, well, what is that exactly? Because it's not my wheelhouse, right? But the enabling context had to do with implementation teams. So not just practices, but how you actually implement that. And there was a quote that stood out for me as Ms. Elma Stratton. So I'm going to take a page out of your book. And teachers learning a new skill will positively impact student learning. In order for that to happen, they need 50 hours of instruction. That's a lot of instruction as we talk about, training our teachers and giving them new resources and PLC time and all that. That's a pretty heavy lift. So it's just something that really stood out to me. I also went to a workshop on special students with special needs making the transition from high school and outside of high school or beyond high school. One of the presenters was from the Boggs Center at Rutgers, and they specifically focused on what's called person-centered planning. And it's essentially transition planning. They said that that should be starting at the very least at age 14. There should start to be conversations about the transition into life after high school, what do kids want to do? And I think those are conversations that a lot of probably families have. And I think some of our students do have start those conversations with guidance counselors. But there specifically was focused on students with special needs and how to do that. And there were some really good handouts that are being used. The person from the Boggs Center said that they actually used to come and work with alternative high school pre-COVID. Was very familiar and had done a lot of work with the staff in our alternative high school, which learning a lot there, right? Learning that piece. So it was really kind of neat to see how engaged some of these students, and they had videos of students who were doing things. I mean, some of these students really had a lot of struggles and challenges, and yet we're leading their entire team in their school, leading the meeting. They weren't just part of a meeting, they were leading the meeting. It was really neat to see how creative and engaged these kids were. And one of the presenters kept talking about this can be integrated even into the financial literacy class, because she's now teaching that class in her school. And she said that she's integrating transition planning with all students, even resume building in a resume style. It was really neat. So very creative. Nice to see that happening. I went to a workshop on a district that their entire presentation was about a room in they wanted to renovate their media center. And this was very relevant to what we're going through, right? And they decided they wanted to turn it into a learning commons, not just a media center, with this really creative kind of learning area in the middle of the learning commons, high tops, just a whole different feel. And to me, it looked more like what you see in college. They have their board meetings in their learning commons, apparently, it's kind of very state of the art. They have a glass room in the center of their learning commons, and it's a specific learning space. And some teachers choose to hold classes in there. And this is a room that would have been a library, now it's a learning commons. So it was really, really cool to see the creativity as we're going through, our plans, upcoming plans, and renovations in our schools. And I got to talk to the folks from a company called Tech, who I guess Mr. Plavinsky, I ran into you there as well. It's a company that we already work with. They're one of our vendors, and some really cool interactive screen playground, which I think my kids would love. I'm not sure, as a parent, I would love my kids to have something like this in their schools, but really creative kind of technology integration that, kind of along the lines of what, Mr. Avadia, you talked about, AI, there's just all kinds of things that are now available that we got exposure to. So that was neat. Probably longer than my 3 minutes, but.
All right. Who could follow that up? Mrs. Dong?
I just want to share the NJSBA. I also went to the Z space. I find it very interesting learning about the outer space, AI, VR, AR, whatever they call. But it's very good that the kid of our future need to understand, I guess, or need to learn anyway about the STEM, the computer science. The Rutgers actually has a program that the high school kids can also participate in. I can pass this to Dr. Malash and look into it. And then there's another program called TEAL. It's the Technology Education Learning Support. I think this is volunteer people. It's there's no cost for the student to work with them. I don't recall, but I think that's what it is. And I also have some information on that as well that I can just scan it to you guys. I hope this is helpful for you guys, especially the people who like to be in outer space.
I want to go to outer space. Okay. Mrs. Fleischer.
Thank you. First, I wanted to also congratulate our own Board of Education member, Rosie Arroyo, for being a superwoman also. Sorry, I don't have your right up in front of me, but you can read it in South Jersey Magazine. She's amazing, and we all congratulated her on that. So it's a big congratulations to Rosie. I also wanted to talk about the workshop. The first thing I wanted to say is I apologize to Mrs. Wilson because she actually did a great, from what I heard, a great class. And I was actually at the legislative panel at the same time. So, but I just want to congratulate you for that. So I went to one of the things that I tried to sort of split my interests all around. I went to the legislative panel that was actually done by the Garden State Coalition that I sit on for the committee here. So it was, first of all, it was great to see the director. We have only seen her, I have only met her once in person because we're a lot of times virtually. And it was great to see our legislators be there and give a little update. The biggest update the whole time, it was an hour and a half, but I found something that I think we had spoken about before, but with our issue of not getting many teachers, having difficulty getting teachers, the Ed TPA test that was made to come into law when the Christie administration, so it was been a while ago, and it was an additional level of testing and costs that all teachers going into teaching would have to do in New Jersey. And it was becoming very prohibitive, especially after COVID, but they just actually passed that it does not have to happen anymore. It will no longer be used for our new teachers, our teachers coming out of college, and the colleges just have to give the state another test that equals what they're doing. And really, and our colleges are doing such an amazing job anyways. They haven't come to any conclusion of what those tests would be like, but I'm hoping it will be easier for our teachers coming out of school to get into our public education and possibly Cherry Hill. So that was great. The other one that I went to that I wanted to talk about was Sustainable Jersey. It was talking about food waste. And it was helped. There's actually certain programs that are being run that are talking about reducing food waste when it comes to our kids when they eat lunch. And it was an amazing program, but the one thing that I pulled from it was called a share table. And this is what some of the districts are doing. And I've mentioned to some of the board members that were down there, and we're going to look into seeing if this is a possibility in Cherry Hill, where it's actually okay and legal if children take things for lunch, because as you know, like when you get a lunch, you have to take like the 5 items, depending on that counts as a full lunch. And if something is totally packaged and unopened, that in these districts, if a child doesn't eat it at the end of lunch, they can put it what they call on the share table or like a shelf. And some of these smaller districts and even us have done this. And at the end of lunch, they'll have like 100 items. And these items can be taken by kids who didn't feel like they ate enough at lunch, so they might not have had enough money. Or if they know when they're going home, they're going to be hungry and they need a snack. And so they said that it works really well to be able to reduce waste, because if that doesn't happen, then everything gets thrown in the garbage. And there's the amount of, I have to tell you, it was pretty amazing. They actually had Rutgers go to one of the schools that is one of the districts that's piloting this program. And they had them actually weigh the waste of each of the days. They went for 3 days of the school, and it's amazing pounds of waste that the kids are throwing out. And it's only because a lot of times we're asking them to take something and they don't really want it. So it would be great if in that case, if it's fully unopened, that we're able to have them be able to do that. There's many different ways of doing it, but one of the schools talked about, rolling the cart out to the buses. So if kids don't have after school snacks, they could actually take it on the way home. And also like maybe the athletics for kids that need snacks for athletics. So it's just, there's a lot of different things that they talked about. And so it could be a possibility for us. It will take a lot of, talking and organizing, but, it's something I'd like to bring back to the committees to see if we can do something with, because I think it's great about when we talk about food scarcity, we also talk about the fact that, kids were used to free lunches and now they have to pay for it. So there may be that sort of divide that we're having here that could maybe, a little bit will help with that. I also went to an esports. I was really interested in esports. My sons actually play, but not in esports. So they're like gamers in their own way. But what I found interesting is that, because I had to get my head around, how is it a sport, right? Dr. Morton had talked about like esports before to us, and it's really become up and coming in colleges and everything. So it was great to see like lots of different like business teachers coming to talk about using it in their classes to teach entrepreneurship, and different schools having teams. And I thought what was interesting is they talked about soft skills of leadership also, because there's managers or different ways or technology that you can learn. So it's not all just about the players. And the other thing that I thought was very interesting is they talked about the fact that all the players have an avatar. So no one knows if you're female or male or what race you are, anything, if you have whatever you want to be, you can be on this and no one would know. And it sort of equals the playing field literally for every single person. So I found that interesting because I didn't even think about that. So it sort of opened my eyes to some more interesting things with esports. That's it.
All right, very good. Dr. Root?
Try to keep brief. So the board conference that we all went to, my biggest readout at the strategic planning committee meeting, I gave most of my report out on the conference, but I had stuff talking about sustainability. I think that's a brand new thing in our board goals. So that's something that I think a bunch of us went to sessions on sustainability things. I think it's going to be a nice space to talk about. In the future, there's a lot of things that are kind of zero sum, like where you can produce initiatives that kind of pay for themselves. A lot of it's something that's important to students. It's something that allows a lot of sustainability. It's something that gives a lot of ways to give back to the community, to give back to. It's kind of a really nice space for students to learn not only about specific educational things, but also how to like give back to the community and world around them. So also there's a lot of little pockets of money out there. I think that was kind of the biggest takeaway is, you know, when you're looking for sustainability and you want to, you know, kind of work on your grounds and stuff, there's a lot of small grants out there that from different organizations. The session I was at was put on by the Audubon Society and the Federal Department of Education. So that was one thing. A lot of the other stuff you guys have covered, so I don't really need to go on and on about that. We talked, Ms. Fleischer kind of alluded to a little bit, like some of the, you know, different legislative and government things. One thing, you know, like I think we from time to time understand how difficult it is for us to accomplish certain things given state laws. I think that is present in fair funding and a whole bunch of other stuff. I experienced that when I tried to go to the Governance 3 training and realized that they don't let you skip around. I wasn't going to get credit for that. So I had to go to Government 2, which was finance, boring. Sorry. I really wanted to go to student because Government 3 was student progress, and that seemed much more where I wanted to be. But I did learn lots of stuff about school financing and as I said in strategic planning, I'll say to the full board, like it might be time for boards, us and others, to start taking our fight to the state and being like, it's time to change some of the rules that don't make any sense. So.
All right. Is that everyone? Okay. Great. So we're going to go with first public comment. And as I'm fond of saying in these exact words, Cherry Hill is a community that values education, and educational topics often bring out passionate response. The Cherry Hill Board of Education supports a school climate in which our diversity is a source of strength and all are included. Respect is foundational in how we treat you, how we treat each other, and how we support our administration and staff in their essential work. Please join us in practicing the utmost respect for all. And for rules, in public session 1, public comment 1, students may speak on anything. Everybody else got to be an agenda item 17 to 20, but there will be a public comment too. You get 3 minutes and we'll monitor it through the thing. I think that's most of it. Who would like to speak first? Student, floor is yours.
All right. Hello, my name is Jack Neary. I reside in Cherry Hill. Hello, today I wish to speak upon the letter that was sent out to parents on October 21st about the hallway situation at West High School and the climate overall. I don't believe the solution is to tighten rules in this manner. The administration claims you do not want to see these students get in trouble or become part of criminal justice system. However, I see you bringing a prison system to these children. The tightening on rules in this manner will only create a passive-aggressive climate and destroy these kids' passion to learn and create a hostile environment. It will also create resentment between staff and students. It is demoralizing to the teachers, turning them into bathroom guards when time could be spent helping students. I am fortunate that I truly enjoy learning, but that is not true for all kids. Maybe because a teacher couldn't reach them and find a way to get them interested in subjects, or a variety of reasons, whether it be, I'm not sure, just variety. The system failed these kids and allows them to go down this path. We need to reach these kids, make them try to enjoy learning without creating a system that forces them into it. When it comes to this sort of thing, we should ask the kids who are struggling, who are wandering in the halls and who don't want to be in class, because I think their input is probably the most important, because there is the biggest deep-rooted issue is why they don't want to be there. That is the issue at heart that we need to fix. And I do wish to clarify, by not having very strict rules, I don't mean let everything go to chaos. I mean, be a little more lenient in certain aspects and not very, very strict. And that is all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. No hands online, no one approaching. We move on. And we move on to a tab I have open. Okay. So, all right, we go right into board work session. We turn to Mrs. Royo to lead us through curriculum and instruction, please.
Thank you. So you just had the presentation that was shared with us the other week with the results, and we already had discussions on some next steps. So the feedback today is helpful, and we'll work on that. We went over a couple policies, the school parent and family engagement one was updated. I think the last time we spoke, we were waiting on each school to update their individual family engagement policy. So that's been done and that was presented. We went over 2425 emergency virtual and remote instruction. We went over the HIB policy, and then we also talked about policy and regulation on resource materials and the form for citizens to request for reconsideration of instructional material, and that's still a process that we have, and it's still there. We're following it and just to make it, if anybody needs it, it's there. But no additional conversation around that. And then we had the conversation earlier on the SLA results. So I think that's pretty much it. It wasn't that long of a meeting besides the presentation. Do you know, Ben, do you want to add anything? Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Sorry about that.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. We're going to move on to business and facilities and Ms. Stern.
Okay, so we met for an hour on Tuesday, November 1st, and the vast majority of our meeting was discussing a very exciting vote we're taking tonight, which is to vote to start selling the bonds. So in order to have money to do projects, we actually have to sell these bonds on the marketplace. So our group was Mrs. Fleischer, Mr. Mayor, and we had a long discussion, an in-depth discussion, which I think everyone, had a chance to kind of review multiple different aspects of it. But essentially, we have some really exciting top line news. So I think I'm first going to turn to Mr. Mayor. You're going to say a couple things. We're each going to take a little bit of a bite of the apple about what's happening with selling the bonds. And then we'll go from there.
Sure,
Mr. Mayor.
happy to do it. And first, I also want to thank our bond counsel, Tony Salamini was on the line, and financial advisor was on the line as well, giving us all this information. It was important, and I think important for all of the rest of you to, we all know how hard we work outside of these meetings. This was just one of those examples of a lot of time, a lot of effort went into not just that hour that we were there, but also in preparing for that hour that we were there so that we could make good, efficient use of the time. So tonight we'll have a recommendation on a vote on how to handle the bonds. Thankfully, we were successful in getting the bond referendum vote yes. So $363 million isn't available to us yet. There are certain ways that we have to raise that money. Basically, we sell the bonds. Well, there's really two options that were presented to us with a strong recommendation from our experts. Option one would be to sell $300 million now or soon, and then the remainder thereafter, some years after. Option two would be to split the 363 in half, 185 now, 185 a handful of years later. And then there's really no option three. We cannot sell all $363 million worth of bonds. Now, Ms. Fleischer will explain why that is. So there's two options on the table. Our bond counsel and financial advisor have strongly recommended that we sell 300 million now, raise that money now, as opposed to only selling half now. The reason for that is at the time that during the entire run up to the bond sale, the markets were in a very different position than they are in now. In those just couple of months, the position of the markets have changed significantly in our favor if we are able to reinvest bond proceeds now, earn interest on that reinvestment. That earned interest would then be returned to the taxpayers. Whatever money we are able to earn, or that bond money is able to earn in interest, that can't be used for additional projects. It's required that we return that to the taxpayers in interest, which is wonderful, because really what that means is we will be in a position of being able to have sort of over delivered on a promise. The amount of money per household over the course of the paying back these bonds is going to be less. The reason why our financial advisors are strongly recommending that we sell 300 now as opposed to 185 is simply because we know now what's available to us. We know what the markets are now. They are very comfortable that we will be able to, or they will be able to reinvest that large chunk, take advantage of the fact that we're issuing tax exempt bonds, and we can reinvest all that money. Now take advantage of the favorable markets. Looking years ahead, there's no way to know whether or not the markets will be as favorable to us for reinvestment as they are right now. So this really sort of striking while the iron is hot, but doing so in a thoughtful way. Our financial advisors are going to be working with a firm that really, this is what they do. They monitor the markets daily, probably really hourly, to make sure that all of the invested bond proceeds are safe and secure, and that they are always moved into other securities that will provide that level of interest for us. So that really reduces the risk of what may happen in the future if we don't do this. So that's what their recommendation is to us, and ultimately that's what our committee is recommending to the remainder of the board.
That's great. Thank you. And Mrs. Fleischer, could you speak about why we're not selling all the bonds at once, given the favorable market conditions?
Sure, I will. Actually, that was a question that I had right away, is why wouldn't we sell all the bonds at once? Why are we splitting it 300 and then 63.911? Actually, Sherry Tracy, the financial advisor, and Tony Solomon, the bond counselor, and Mrs. Sugars, who continued up till the beginning of the meeting to make sure that I understood everything, which I appreciate. What happened is that the bond counsel expressed to us that with 363 million, the IRS has actually the reasonable expectation that the district has to draw down a certain amount each year. So by 5 years, we had to have drawn down 85% of that 363 million. And Bob Garrison had said that due to supply chain and possible contractor issues, he can't guarantee that he'd be able to do that. So by changing it to 300, and then within 5 years, so it would be by this December 2022, and then within the next 5 years, the 63.911, he would be that would be fine. 300 million they'd be able to take care of, and that would be enough. In fact, as Mrs. Sugars reminded me tonight, $70 million will be actually spent over the first year alone. So we feel comfortable as a committee having that split, especially after it was explained to us exactly why we were doing that.
Thank you, Mrs. Fleischer. So the vote tonight is to sell $300 million of the bonds, understanding that our interest rate, I'm happy to say, is around 4.25%, right? Even though we know what's happening in the rest of interest rates, ours was predicted to be 4%. We're very, very close to that, even though that prediction was made 10 months ago or 11 months ago at this point, something like that. So 4.25%, 300 million, we sell the money, we reinvest the money in very safe federal securities, and we earn back that a lot of that interest for the period of time that we have this money, as we're, whatever's left as we're spending it on projects. And that's monitored closely. And then we're basically saving money for the taxpayers, which is such a win, in my opinion. What that means in real money for the average assessed home is going to pay, instead of $399 a year for the bond increased in taxes, which is what we predicted before the bond vote, it's actually going to be closer to estimated. Mrs. Sugars, will you remind me of the number? Because I actually am, you're my numbers person, 379. So estimated $379 a year in tax impact for the average assessed home instead of the estimated 399. So we're saving the taxpayers a few dollars. So that vote will be tonight. The other pieces we touched on in the meeting were the expected projects that are coming. That are going to be, I'm going to make sure I cover this list well. So, sorry, I just want to make sure we cover them well. We're expecting to do 10 roofs this summer. And sorry, just making sure I pull up my notes. That's not it. 10 roofs, playgrounds, a number of playgrounds. Getting lost with my notes of where I have this. Oh my goodness, thank you. Just pull up the minutes, right? Thank you. Okay. 10 roofs. Start on the all-purpose rooms, which will be at Mann, Sharp, Knight, Kingston, Barton, and Johnson. Renovate completely the HVAC in D wing of High School West, first and second floors. Redo the flooring in the corridor at Rosa, which is so right now we have carpet that's in really bad conditions and tiles. Hopefully, these are the things we hope to get done over the next year, starting probably mostly in the summer. Adding the bleachers, stadium bleachers and lighting at High School East. Doing the and also setting up the temporary classroom units that are going to be necessary at Carusi in order to get all the work done there, which is a lot of work. And then, of course, we have some other work that's being done out of our capital reserves too. So we are also doing playgrounds at Payne and Hart. That's going to be over this summer. And those are going to be models for other elementary playgrounds. So this is all the projected projects totaling about a cool $70 million we plan to spend our first year. The last thing we talked about, let me just pause. Well, let me go through the rest of it and then if we have questions. The last thing we talked about is that, I'm sorry. When we sell the bonds, if we approve it tonight, that we're going to be able to submit the paperwork to the state to actually start getting our money back from the state in the form of debt servicing starting in 2023-2024 school year. So in essentially that September school time frame. So if we delay in selling the bonds, we're going to be delayed in getting that money in our budget. So we don't want that. All right. That's why tonight. So we are also, we have a responsibility to submit an annual maintenance report to the state. So that just outlines the monies that we spend and the work we've done in all of our schools, which is something that we do every year, and we have a good amount of work that we're getting done. So between that and so that's called the comprehensive maintenance plan, and we also and the M1 reports, those are being submitted as well. So that's a CUSAC requirement, it's a monitoring requirement, and it's an accountability piece about how much maintenance we're doing in our buildings. All right, I'm going to stop there. It's a lot of stuff, but I think everyone, hopefully had a chance to look into this. Are there any questions? We do have, I believe, our financial advisor, Sherry Tracy, and also on the line, as well as Tony Salamini, who is the bond counsel. So if we have any questions for them, you can ask them otherwise, or for us. Otherwise, that's it. Mr. Ovadia.
All right, so thank you. It sounds like we delved deeply into that. And obviously we've reviewed some material ahead of time. So question for Sherry Tracy, our trustee Phoenix advisor. There's an asterisk here. Now, just being of average, just trying to understand the situation. The 300 million, if we go forward today, we know for certainty, more or less, within a bounds what that could be. Is most of the uncertainty on the 379 estimated, projected, hoped for? Is most of it on the 63, or are there issues in the next 5 weeks that will impact that 4.25%?
Definitely the 4.25% is not set until we sell. Right now, at this point, if the board is to approve the resolution tonight outlining the sale of the bonds, we'd be scheduled to sell on December 8th. So a month from today. So we definitely have, definitely there are things, of course, that could impact the market. The 4.25 is actually a touch on the conservative side as well. If we sold today, we'd be a little bit under that, but the updated projections are at the 4.25, the numbers we spoke about. So definitely things could change. And that would absolutely be monitored. If there was something that, deeply impacted the markets, sent rates to 5 or 6%, the district could absolutely pull back and decide not to sell. In fact, we'd recommend you do that. However, we'll be watching it and moving forward. And as long as rates stay in the same range, very comfortable with the 4.25% and the results that we were talking about. And as Mr. Mayor highlighted as well, really the benefit that we're seeing in this market, rates have come up a touch from what we had projected, but the flip side of that is the reinvestment, being able to earn, maybe $30 million in interest earnings that will go back directly to offset debt service directly back to the taxpayers. And that's what helps lower that annual tax impact on the bonds.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions from board members? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Ovadia.
All right, that is BNF. Next. Oh, yeah, Tony Salamini, thank you also for joining. Sherry Tracy, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
No problem.
Appreciate you guys. And don't be a stranger, and you're even welcome in person if you so choose in the future. Okay. Have a great night. In the next part, we're going to go to Mrs. Elmore Stratton to give us the info on human resources.
Thank you. I'm actually excited this time I can actually say more things. So HR committee, tonight you'll see a job description. We have some updates and just minor changes you can take a look at for the position that's listed there if you have access to the notes or agenda from our meeting. So we just did those changes. We reviewed those. The biggest highlight that we talked about in our committee meeting is recruitment. And that's something that I shared last month that will be a standing item on our agenda to discuss as a committee. And I'm really excited. So from last month to now, the admin team has nailed down December 15th for recruitment fair, which I'm really excited for. It will be for positions in the district, my favorite word, certificated and non-certificated positions will be there, as well as ESS for substitutes and Aramark. Our target is really to get some of those folks that are January graduates, having them be interested. I love to hear from Ms. Adrian. She shared that this information is being shared with 12 different colleges. as well as some minority fraternities and sororities. And then we, of course, will promote internally. And so I expect every board member to be promoting that when we have it. And then Ms. Adrian shared with us just some of the other places that they'll be trying to focus those recruitment efforts. So December 15th, lock it in to support and share. And as I said, they'll promote that internally as well. Another piece that we talked about was the program approval. And for this one, I probably need Dr. Malash or Ms. Adrian to explain, because I really can't explain that one very well. Or the C, is it CEA or CAS program approval?
Department of Education has instituted a program where they've have a new certificate. It's called a CE Limited. And it's for people who have a praxis score that would not traditionally allow them to apply for certification, or if they have coursework that is not, that is missing, that they have the opportunity to get a certification, be hired, and complete those pieces while they are employed. So we had made application to Department of Education, and we were accepted into that program. And we hired our first candidate with the limited CE this week, and that person is approved tonight.
Awesome. Thank you for adding that. You want to add something?
I do, Ms. Helmer Stratton. And just the CE is called, it's Certificate of Eligibility. So new teachers or newly certified teachers in most content areas receive either a CE Certificate of Eligibility or a CEAS, which is a Certificate of Eligibility with advanced standing, depending upon the pre-service program in which they were involved. And just special thank you to Ms. Adrian and the folks in the HR department for pursuing this as an option to continue to expand the possible candidates that we can bring in. The candidate that Ms. Adrian is talking about, she's been working with since the summer. A wonderful candidate. We were really excited is here working with our children, but this would not be possible to bring people like this in without the work that the HR department has done.
Absolutely. So that was some really good news for us. So at this point, you know, recruitment is our biggest thing. So we just want to get out there and share, and bring some great folks into our district. I also just shared with them some of the things that I learned at the board conference as it pertains, and I was really excited. A lot of stuff that I shared, Miss Adrian was like, we on it, we already did it, we know that, people, we got that. And I was like, great, do that. So it's really exciting, and like I said, we're going to continue to touch base on that, and we'll come back in our next, not in our next meeting, but when after we reorg, we'll be able to hear from them in terms of what our results were for that. And am I missing anything? Are we good? Anything, Miss Adrian? Can I share that? I don't. No? Okay. I think we're good. Miss Adrian, that's good? All right. Thank you.
All right, we'll keep going with Mrs. Fleischer and P&L.
Thank you. We spoke about a few things in the P&L meeting. The first being the new Strauss Esme policy revisions. The first policy we spoke about was policy 2425, emergency virtual or remote instruction. That was also on the CNI agenda. And that is an instruction plan that the district's remote instruction plan was approved actually in September, but this was actually Strauss Esme needed to also include and make sure it's the same as the Department of Education, because the Department of Education came up with different wording. And it also made sure that every year the virtual instruction program, which is enacted if there's 3 days of non-school, is that's enacted for the 3 days of non-school, and to make sure that the board every year okays that and approves it. So that was the main thing. Mrs. Wethington, am I missing anything about that? No? Okay, good. Then the next one was policy 5512, which is harassment, intimidation, or bullying. And this again was an update by the New Jersey Department of Education. And they actually, so Strauss Esme is also making sure that they mirror the Department of Education's new policy that aligns with the model policy, the minimal model policy language. So there's a few things just to point out that are different in this policy versus what was before. And one is that there are report forms, one for school, new report forms, and one will go to the school personnel and one will go to families and caregivers. And that's required to use in report of HIB. The student intervention plan for a student will happen if there's 3 HIB incidents occurring in 1 year. So that requires the student and the parent to complete a class or training program to reduce HIB behavior. The third is that the superintendent the principal has the option of actually having a preliminary determination to see if it is HIB or not. And whether it's considered HIB or not, the superintendent has to have that has to go to the superintendent, and Dr. Meloche or the superintendent would have to be required to approve that. And that also can go to appeal based on our Board of Education regulations. And then another one to point out is that in the district where preliminary determination is the option, they must notify the parents of the alleged offender and the victim with formal notice of the decision not to initiate an HIB investigation where the principal decided to do the preliminary determination. And like I said before, such appeal is pursuant to the Board of Education policy. So those are like some of the highlights of the HIB policy. There are 45 pages. Not realizing I did print it all out. So I did random. I will tell you right here. So there's a few things. So I gave you the 4 top highlights. But it's actually like a living document because this thing is, always changing all the time. So so Mrs. Wethington, anything else to add with that? Okay, thank you. Now, the next thing we'll talk about is the procedure 5350, which is student suicide prevention. It says, and also the discussion on S12. So S12, what we had asked our committee to do is Mrs. Wethington was great about actually giving us a sort of overview of when and how it is used, because Mrs. Stern had stated that she's on the mental health task force and also the S12 committee, and we are really wanting to learn what's going on, how it is used, like what are the best practices. And we know the committee is looking into actually making things even better for our students. So Mrs. Wethington was great about giving us an update with that. One of the things, just to point out that our committee is looking at, well, first of all, one of the things that I'd like to point out is that this is a procedure, S12, and S12 is not a policy. So policies are what we actually vote upon in Board of Ed. Procedures are something that we can give input into and help, have discussions about. So this is something that we are having discussions about and talking about, like I said, best practices and learning about too, and how, and to make sure it's being used in the best extent in our district. So the way, one of the things in S12 that the committee had brought up, that Mrs. Stern had brought up to us and other people that and Mrs. Wethington also, is that the way that S12 is used, and that is when a student either says that they are going to hurt themselves or someone else, whether through action or through words. And it is deemed that is going to be a danger. So there are certain stipulations that go right into effect. And that's obviously with so much violence in all of our schools, this is very, very important procedure to have that's followed up by policy behind it. But one of the things that we're talking about is, so this procedure pre-K to second grade, if that happens with a young child, that young child, actually, the parent is called, the young child is not taken out of class, and they are discussed, and the parent has to sign a piece of paper that they're aware of what has happened. And then they have a discussion, and if any further consultations have to happen or any interventions that would happen. Starting at grade 3, that same thing would happen, because at grade 3, you get one waiver, meaning they could have one time that a child might say something. They can talk, the parent again is told what happened. The parent has to sign a sheet of paper that they know what happened. And again, if any interventions have to happen or consultations, that would happen. But any further time, if that child has something that they've done or said, after that first time, the child is sent out for evaluation and won't be let back into the school system until they're evaluated. And someone from, like, whether it is a district person, not administration, but someone that's hired by our district, a medical consultant that we have, their own person, or it could be a crisis center, they need to sign that to come back in. So that's the way it is now in grades 4 through 12. Automatically they're sent out for evaluation. There's discussion to possibly extend grades 4 and 5 to get the one waiver. And then that would be then any additional things, they would be automatically sent out. So that is something that we're exploring, and that's something that the committee brought up. So we're trying to look at it. The basis is to keep everybody safe in our district, keep our students safe, keep our staff safe, keep our administration safe. So that is in the utmost importance in our mind. So we don't take any changes to this lightly. So I think that's why we're very happy that Mrs. Wethington could give us such history on this. So that is something that we're talking about in P&L. So then we will be talking about it next month also to see, and this was just a beginning conversation. It will be something that will be brought up, and we'll be giving updates, pretty regularly, or at least, over the next few months about where we're going with that. The next thing was a code of conduct update. As we've shared in the past, Mrs. Wethington, is there anything else that I need to say about S12?
No, I would just add one clarification.
Thank you.
That the changes for pre-K to 2 started this year.
Thank you. The code of conduct update, Mrs. Wethington has been wonderful, about updating us on the code of conduct over the last year has been updated to be gender neutral language, making sure all the policies are updated, make sure it's updated. I think I've said before, one of the things that they had asked is, do people know what is in the code of conduct? Now, we all have to check it off, but I don't think many people read the code of conduct until you have to, if your child has something happen to them or they've done something. So what we're hoping to do, and Mrs. Wethington and her team have been great. They're making infographics so that it's easier for the parents, but also the staff and the teachers to understand and be able to translate our code of conduct into how it can be used. The communication is a lot clearer with what we're looking at with the infographics, as well as it will help consistency of how the code of conduct is used throughout the district. So I really, everyone on the committee is really liked and thought very highly of these infographics. They've been wonderful, and they're in draft form right now. I'm sure over the next few months, we'll be able to give them to you to look at and give us any of your input. But I think right now we're on a great trajectory to do that. And then one of the things that we were talking about in our committee is once we have that set, we can really start looking at restorative justice practice in our district, because that's going to take a long time. We needed to get this base done so that we have this, and then we can look forward. Mrs. Wethington, is there anything else about that? But thank you so much for the work on that. So then we get to the second readings of policies from Strauss Esme. The first one is P 2415.04, Title I, District-wide Parent and Family Engagement. This policy is being aligned, was actually brought up in CNI. It's being revised to align itself with federal updates. And we already had the first reading of that. And then the last one is P 5511. Our dress and grooming is coming for second reading. And I just wanted to say that that I'm very happy that, and our committee is very happy that it's come to second reading, and that it will hopefully be approved tonight. And when it's approved, it goes into approval into the schools. And then the building principals will be meeting with their with all the teachers and staff to let them know that there's these changes. Discussions will take place, and Dr. Malesh has said discussions will take place, on every single building level to make sure that everyone is aware of these changes. And we really want to thank Mrs. Wethington and her team for helping us get through this. But most importantly, I do want to give a huge shout out for student voice. Especially Aiden and Liz here at our table. They were one of the first to really be strong voices, as well as, Beck for writing in, and many of the students for actually, letting their voices be heard. And I think will be a wonderful policy that will, reduce, I think, a lot of the stringent rules that we've had in the past with the dress code, and make it more gender neutral, and also increase really cultural sensitivity, I believe, in how we approach the grooming and dressing. So that is the dressing and grooming, and that will be up for the second reading. A first reading is P 2415.5, Title I, School Parent and Family Engagement. And again, this policy is also being revised to align itself with federal updates. And that is the end of the P&L committee report. Does anyone have any questions?
Ms. Fleischer, can I
Yeah.
just to clarify,
Yes,
the policies, the first and second readings
yes.
are on the work session agenda for this evening. The board will vote on them
Right.
at the next meeting on the
Okay,
22nd.
right. Okay, that's right. We're not voting on it
Right, so
tonight.
it's,
So
it'll go
we
through the
have
full
to- we have
cycle.
another, yeah, exactly. I apologize. Thank you. So I apologize. Sort of jumping the yeah, it's very exciting. You could tell I was very excited. So soon, Aiden, soon, I promise. Yes, Mrs. Stern.
So thanks. Just a couple questions, and I guess maybe thoughts. Just with having sat in on the S12 task force, there was such great input and really thoughtful, best practices, that were brought by the staff in terms of figuring out how to improve upon this. And of course, now, like I said earlier, I'm a little aware that this is being looked at even from a county level in terms of how could this be, implemented in other districts don't have to reinvent the wheel. So a few of the pieces that, and I think this is kind of like, this is how it's useful to look at all these things is, the staff input. And there was some really good pieces of input that the staff brought that I think as you're further, as Mrs. Wellington and her folks are, developing, diving further into it. I think it's really important that we ensure that those, those ideas are really incorporated, because those are the people who are dealing with this on a daily basis, right? The staff at the building level staff who really brought them, and it has to do with kind of differentiating between, things that are more blatant and clear concerning actions and behaviors versus some things that, are considered very, transient and literally in the middle of play, that kids might make a gesture in the middle of play and how that's interpreted. So those are the kinds of really, I think, well thought out, conversations that are having, and ideas of how to do that, as well as I think the idea we keep talking about, in many areas, we have 10% new staff this year, right? So that means that we have a lot of people who are just coming into the district, and just ensuring that some of the more experienced staff who have really good practices. And to your point, Ms. Elmore Stratton, you said earlier, in other ways, I think we can look across the board, and we always want to draw from our our really kind of experienced staff and their expertise and how they're doing things, and then standardize that. So that's also a discussion, was part of the discussion in terms of like the documentation and updating the documentation that's used. So I'm excited to hear what comes next. And happy to be kind of an observer in that room and hear how it's coming to fruition through committee. So that those are comments about that. And just want to also, just a quick question about the HIB update to the policy. You mentioned that if there are 3 incidences of HIB, that the student and the family will there'll be interventions. Is that for if the student is considered founded responsible for bullying? And it's not necessarily, what are we doing in terms of if there's a student who is on the end of being bullied and it's happening multiple times? Are there new interventions that we're also going to be looking at? Are there other pieces to the puzzle of the environment and or the student's experience or whatever that's a piece of that? Is that going to be addressed?
Good question. The first part of the question, it's actually stated a student intervention plan for a student who is an offender in 3 HIB incidents occurring within 1 school year. The second part, I would have to hand over to Mrs. Wethington to see.
So we'll certainly provide interventions to students who have been victims multiple times. We actually track that, not formally, informally. So that's currently happening, but we won't have a plan for those students the way that we'll have a plan for the alleged offenders, because that's required in the new regs.
So just a follow-up question. So the new regs have requirements, but if we're already doing that, would it make sense to also say, let's officially codify that we are also going to it's both sides of the coin. Maybe it's not a requirement, but maybe it would be a good approach to, because this is something that we deal with, right? As board members, we deal with hearing HIB stuff. So, I think perhaps it makes sense to have both the kind of the terminology that's used, offender and victim, that we have something a little more concrete for both students.
We have something in place for victims. It's not as concrete as it would be with this plan that we've not had to develop yet, but we'll have to develop. I'll certainly have a conversation with the ABSs about it and see what their comfort level is.
And we can bring it back to the committee and, go back around with Mrs. Wellington and get back to you.
Thank you. And you know what, I just wanted to circle back one more thing. Speaking in terms of interventions, I guess that's another question too, going back to the conversation about S12 in terms of that, again, being part of the conversation, that there's a procedure. And so what are some of the outcomes and interventions as well? Especially if there's multiple incidences with a student, as part of the conversation too. I think that's another piece that I think, again, when you look at building level staff and the things they're talking about, that's having that be more, I think, again, things spelled out, standardized, et cetera.
We can definitely, include that in our conversations for P&L when we're talking about S12. Good idea.
Thank you.
Aiden.
Okay, hi. So thank you for all the work on the dress code. Excited to see that moving forward. As you said, it's a big student voice piece. I had a couple questions. So I know there were no updates on the policy change itself, but I was wondering if there were any updates on some of the questions we discussed. I'm not sure how long ago it was, might have been a month or two now, but about like the implementation. So I know you spoke to some of it, but my first question was just to clarify, like from a student perspective, so the next meeting is November 22nd. That's when this would be passed if the board votes to do so. When would it go into effect? Would it go into effect the next day? There's school on the 23rd, or is there like a implementation period?
I believe it's immediate, but I'm going to pass that to Dr. Malash about the implementation and timing of the dress and grooming. Thank you.
So the policy goes into effect after the board adopts it, right? After that second reading. What the implementation looks like is going to be based on discussions that are going to take place at each of the buildings and then by level. So there'll be discussions at High School East and High School West and the alternative program. But what does it look like in those buildings? They'll work through and with Dr. Morton and the administration for the buildings, be staff members involved, students involved, so that they can clarify and explain this is what it looks like here. And the same thing at the middle school levels, the same thing at the elementary level. So I don't expect you would see a change on the 23rd,
Right.
the morning of the 23rd, but a process laid out through the building of this is what it's going to look like. This is how it's going to be implemented.
Mhm. That makes sense. I guess like the aim of my question is less. I understand, there's not going to be like the next morning we're posting, okay, here's the new policy, immediate effect. But like if a kid violates the old policy on the 23rd, because I feel like it's happening every day sometimes, that kids wear things that aren't currently allowed, like how quickly can we have that kind of turnaround? Obviously there has to be time for